the Dementia Whisperer to the stage, and I have really been looking forward to this discussion with Laura. I've seen Laura all over the place on my social media. She is a nationally renowned speaker and author. And we're going to dive deep into the topic of dementia. We're going to talk about her book today. But Laura, thanks for joining us. And before we dive into our discussion, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led to you with this creative and wonderful title of the Dementia Whisperer.
Well, thank you so much. I am so honored to be here sitting next to you with all who have come to join us today. Like I said, I'm honored to be in your presence. And let me start, if you don't mind, Steve, let me start by telling a little story because that's going to help everyone understand how I became the Dementia Whisperer. So I'm going to tell you the story of Peggy. Many years ago, when Peggy was only a 17-year-old young woman, she was a very shy girl. She lived in this farming region surrounded by farmers and ranchers. And once a month in this whole territory, the hundreds of farmers and ranchers and their family members would get together for a good old-fashioned hoedown, square dance, a community event where they could all share with their neighbors. You know, they worked hard from sunrise to sunset, rarely saw anybody throughout the month except their families. So they all looked forward to this good old-fashioned square dance. Everybody talked about it, was looking forward to it once a month, except for Peggy. She was a very shy girl. She didn't want to go socialize. She'd rather sit in her room and read a book. But on this particular night of this dance, all of her girlfriends decided, no, Peggy needed to get out. She was a young, beautiful, vibrant woman. Come on, come to the square dance, have a good time. So her girlfriends got her all dressed up. They pushed her into the square dance hall that night. You know what? There happened to be a guest square dance caller there from one of these little towns, someone that Peggy had never met, a young man by the name of Jack, who was calling the dance that night. And when her girlfriends pushed her into that square dance hall, she looked across the hall and she saw Jack and she turned to her girlfriends and said, "Oh my goodness, that man is so handsome. I'm going to marry that man." And her girlfriends all laughed and said, "No, you won't. You're too shy." But you know what? Peggy persevered. She walked up, she introduced herself. She was seen flirting with Jack throughout that whole dance. And before the end of that dance that night, Jack asked Peggy out on their first date. They began to date over the next year, fell madly in love. And so begins this romantic love story of Jack and Peggy. You know, they fell in love, got married, had in the early years of their marriage, they had 5 healthy babies. Peggy was a wonderful mother, caregiver. She loved caring for babies so much. She began to invite foster children into her home. And before it was all said and done, Steve, she not only successfully raised her own 5 healthy children to young adults, she helped to raise over 20 foster children, and every one of them had special care needs. So all throughout Peggy's life, all throughout her whole married life, she was a caregiver. She cared for all these children and did it in a remarkable way. Now, she did raise all these kids to adulthood. They began to leave the home one by one. And it was time for Jack and Peggy to really plan their retirement dream that they had talked about all their life. Little did they know that there was going to be a very invasive event that was going to change their entire retirement life. So once all of those children were out of the home, they were empty nesters. They sold their house, bought an RV, and began to travel all over. That had always been their retirement dream. But Steve, by now, they were up there in years. So it wasn't long after they began to live this retirement dream that Jack's health began to fail, and he began to show signs and symptoms of dementia. Dementia reared its ugly head into this wonderful retirement dream. Now, Peggy, being a caregiver at heart, she realized that this was serious. She had seen many of her friends and even family members be on a dementia journey. She knew it was long. She knew it was extreme. She knew there was no treatment, no prevention. So she gathered Jack up, took him to their family physician, and they both received the devastating diagnosis that indeed Jack had Alzheimer's disease as the cause of his dementia symptoms. Peggy saw this decline. She knew that she could not give him really the essential, competent, sensitive dementia care that she knew he was going to need on the road. So they gave up their dream. Dementia stole that from them. They sold their RV. They bought a little house in a small town next to some friends of theirs, thinking that Peggy was going to be able to manage this. And she stepped back into that role of being the primary caregiver. And at first she was doing okay, but it wasn't long before dementia overtook that ability for her to manage that, even as that caregiver at heart. So she began to struggle, but she looked around, realized, oh my gosh, we've made a terrible mistake. They isolated themselves away from any family members that could have helped them. She was really on her own. There was no professionals that could help her. And now Jack was wandering. She couldn't take her eyes off of him for a minute, or he was out the door and down the road. She had to call the police a couple times to fetch him and bring him home. He was not sleeping at night. So she was there alone with him. So she was up and down with him all the time too. She was literally having to sleep with one eye open, and she was exhausted because he needed constant surveillance. And he had gotten to a point where he was no longer able to process and recognize who she was. So he resisted her care often because he believed she was a stranger in their own home. She began to call her family because that was the only avenue she had to get emotional support, and they were shocked. Oh my gosh, we had no idea that that's what dementia care was all about. And they, as young adults, they weren't around this. So they told her, you need to get some help in there. And she said, there isn't help here. I'm kind of on my own. So of course the family said, we'll move back and help you. What do you need? And she would say, no, I'm not quite ready to interfere with your life yet. I'll alert you if I can't manage it. I just needed to kind of vent. And so unfortunately, the family believed her, because one night Jack and Peggy are home alone. She's made him a wonderful dinner, as she always did. And doggone it, if when she sits down to have dinner with him, she suffers a major heart attack. Oh. Now, Jack's dementia is so far advanced, he doesn't recognize what she needs. In his confusion, he wanders outside and says something to a passing neighbor about how Peggy's tired. She's sleeping on the floor. So, Steve, by the time help arrives, it's too late. Peggy's gone. Steve, Peggy was my mother.
Oh, man.
I had to learn the hard way, trial by fire, that 68% of the time, if these caregivers, especially a same-age spouse, over half the time, if they don't access help on this long, arduous, demanding journey of dementia care, if they don't access help, they go first. And so my mission now is to help people understand, become dementia aware. What does that mean? Really understand, how does dementia really affect that person? What are they losing? What are they maintaining? How do we connect with what they still have? How do we support them? How do we support that caregiver on this journey? How do we support the professional caregivers on this journey? That's what becoming dementia aware is. And that's what we want to talk about today. So thank you so much, because honestly, I believe in my heart, I have a degree in gerontology, and I couldn't help my mother because I had no understanding about what her needs were, what my dad's needs were. So thank you for allowing me to share that today.
Well, this is a great, very authentic and personal story, and I can see where this led you down this path for your career. You'd mentioned that you are a gerontologist. Now, out of curiosity, did you go down that road before this happened with your mom, or after?
I was actually finishing up my degree in gerontology when this all happened. So I
Right.
was busy with my career and my education, and I had a family, and I lived long distance from her. And I had had discussions with her on several different occasions about what her life had become as they had moved, these few years, as they had kind of isolated themselves near some friends. And so, but she always put on that brave front and
Mhm.
covered for his loss a lot. And now I recognize that, now that I understand. But I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't learn any of this about dementia from my education of
Yeah.
gerontology. It was all just this clinical plaques and tangles, blah, 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 and none of this, what they're actually losing. And after I lost my mom, I really dove into this career. I've been an executive director for an assisted living and memory care. I've owned my own in-home care company and watched my staff from on a professional level try and communicate with my residents who are exhibiting dementia symptoms, and just doing voracious reading and research and talking with those who have dementia symptoms and those caregivers, and just really trying to get from all angles a different perspective about what this actually is, what is happening. So my whole program is to help us become dementia aware, to really understand, to bust these myths about what dementia really is, the fake news that we've learned, and how that fake news provides us with so many obstacles in giving essential sensitive dementia care from all these different perspectives.
I love it. Now, you've just written a book, The Loving Approach to Dementia Care. And one of the things that I love doing with our authors is sort of first getting a behind the scenes on what led you to write the book, which we know a lot about that now, but then also take a glimpse at what's inside the book and maybe use that as a start for our dialogue. And one of the things that strikes me when I'm looking at the chapters here is that every chapter pretty much has a person's name associated with it, and I'm willing to bet that chapter two, Peggy, was what you just told us, correct?
Right. It's
Yeah.
it's that ultimate toll that so many caregivers are paying, they're self-sacrificing, trying to keep up on what I call a dementia care marathon. And no
Mhm.
matter how much we train them, unless they get help, they can't make it across the finish line alone. They just can't. It's too much.
So I'd love to hear some of these stories. I love the story that the personal story that you shared, and I'd love to hear a few that you might want to share with us here. But tell us a little bit about your journey in putting this book together. Obviously, a tremendous amount of research and interviews and went into it.
Well, as I began to journal, as I learned from being in these different professional situations, I began to write the stories as they came across to me. A resident, a family member, and everywhere I go, Steve. If someone says to me, "What do you do for a living?" I'm the Dementia Whisperer. I will tell you this. Almost always the response is, "Oh, my mom. Oh, my uncle. Oh, my." Because 50% of us over the age of 65 have some cause of dementia symptoms. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute because it's really important for us to know that. But I began to write these, and I began to say, okay, this is what I learned from this story. And so that's what the format of the book is. the actual stories, just really looking at how can I help this person? If I were in their position, what would I need the people around them to understand? And that's how the book is written. So as I learned, I wrote down the lessons and the perceptions and how this worked and how everything else that I had learned was not working. So then I wrote it all in this, I put it together a manuscript. I went to the library and I found this wonderful book, How to Get Your Manuscript Published. So I went to the bookstore, bought this book. I followed the directions exactly. I put together this packet with the first chapter, the last chapter, an outline of what it is, who I thought my audience might be, a kind of a marketing packet, which really took a lot of research. I put together 50 packets. I spiral bound them in my home. I put them together. I got this big envelope. I put together a self-addressed envelope so that they could send it back to me if it didn't work. And I went back to the library and I wrote down 50 publishing companies that published books about Alzheimer's, dementia, any Parkinson's, any of the other causes. I wrote down their address and I sent to their publishing firms. I sent 50 packets out. Within six weeks, I got 49 back with
Wow.
no, we're not interested.
Okay.
One of them didn't come back from Johns Hopkins University Press. It landed that particular manuscript, that whole request landed on the head publisher's desk. And she sent me an email that I couldn't believe it. She said, my dad has Alzheimer's. He's in a community, and I have never seen anything as helpful as your book. And I've only read the first and last chapter.
Wow.
I
Oh,
think we can publish this. And then it was another 2 years of going back and forth and changing a lot and paying a editor to help me with it. But the bones were already there. And talk about being led in the right direction and blessed. And so then it was published in 2011. And now it is in its third edition. I've added to it. And right now I'm working with Johns Hopkins University Press to add more, to refine, and do a fourth edition, hopefully coming soon.
wow. This is great. Well, I know I'm interested, and I know our audience is interested in diving into some of your wisdom and your solutions. When you reflect on the book or anything, it doesn't need to be in the book, but tell us like let's start with just some examples of some really challenging situations and the solutions and outcomes that that we may be applying it to our loved ones. And then folks, if you've got a question, if you've got a comment, if you're faced with the decision right now and you don't know where to turn, feel free to drop that into Q&A or chat, because that can really help us with our dialogue today.
Absolutely. I am so open to helping those. The one thing that I find most challenging, Steve, when I go out and do presentations, and I'm in front of hundreds of people all year long, and different venues, professional caregivers, family caregivers, first responders, just all over the board, flight attendants, attorneys, because I believe everyone needs this information. The first thing that I always ask, because it's all about how our society does not perceive in a very helpful way what dementia actually is. So the first question I always ask them, so let me just ask you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the word dementia? What do you think about?
Okay, folks, use chat, and I'd love for you all, for anybody to share that. But for me, it's memory impairment, forgetfulness is what I think
Exactly.
of.
That's because that's what we've learned, but I'm going to surprise everybody because this is not about memory loss.
Okay.
It's about the inability to process the memories we have. Now, why do we have memories? If we have dementia symptoms, why do we have memories from our past? Because we do. Because we stored those memories in our brain when it was still healthy. Now, our challenge when we have some cause of dementia symptoms is that whatever's causing it, and there's over 100 causes, but if it's an illness, a disease, a traumatic brain injury, a stroke, what has happened is our brain has lost the ability to process and store information like it did when we were healthy brain. So now what's happening is things are happening in our life that we should be able to grab and store as memories, but now we can't store them any longer. So it's basically going in one ear and out the other. So it's not really memory loss. It's the inability to access and keep new memories. But the old memories are still there until whatever's causing this brain function loss can actually rob those as well later. But right now, all we have are the memories that we could store when we still had a healthy brain. So dementia symptoms are not all about memory loss. It's about the inability to process information, understand it, make sense of it, and store it and use it like we used to with a healthy brain. Now, that's all information. That's the information we learn when we see something. We process it, we understand it, we make sense of it. It's not our eyes that are seeing, it's our brain that's taking that information that our eyes are seeing, making sense of it, and storing it. It's all about hearing. We come to this world with the ability to hear, but we have to learn how to understand what it is we're hearing, how it feels to us, how it makes sense. We store that together, and that's how we process information is, understanding it. We have to understand it. And these causes of dementia take away our inability to process and understand what we see, process and understand what we hear, process and understand how to move safely. It's all about where it's affecting your storage and your ability to access and your ability to process and understand all kinds of information. That's why these dementia symptoms often go unrecognized, because the families are so busy, or the professionals are so busy trying to figure out what it is they're not remembering, instead of understanding this is a dementia symptom telling you, hey, I've lost this brain function, help me with this. So it could be falling. Falling is an early dementia sign for many of these causes, because they've lost the ability to access balance and coordination and depth perception. And so falling is an often new, unrecognized sign that can go on for years, and people don't recognize that that's a dementia symptom. It's a warning this is going on, right?
Wow. Okay. This is great information. And I've had several authors and dementia experts on here, and what you're talking to me is how I describe to families what they need to think about is it's like we're detectives. It's like we're looking for clues, but then because most of us have not been through and had any coaching or training in this area, we find these clues, and oftentimes our personal reaction can create aggressive or unpleasant behavior with the people that we love, because when somebody says something or does something or falls and it seems like they shouldn't have fallen,
Yes.
our reaction can oftentimes be one of the challenges.
Exactly. If your loved one is continuing to fall, and what you're saying to them is, when you get up, you need to ask for help. We have to understand that that person's brain is still trying to access the information all their life. If they wanted to stand up and go get a cookie, they access the balance and coordination they've learned over a lifetime and perfected, and they just do it and feel that independence. Now that information has been robbed from them, that actual information of balance and coordination. They get up and they're off balance and they fall, but it doesn't feel different to them. They, they are still concerned because the more we try and explain that to them, the less their brain understands it. Their brain has a very unique, our brains as humans has a very unique way of trying to protect us. And our primitive brain can't understand when we say, hey, you can't stand up because you have dementia symptoms. There's this neurological effect that tries to protect them, and they believe they're still normal. They
Okay.
believe they still can access that. So it scares them when we tell them that.
Hmm.
It actually causes that, it makes it worse. It locks up their brain.
So we've got some questions that are coming in, but before I get to those, I'm really interested in with this information that you've shared that we've discovered that something is wrong. Like, what are some of the strategies that and the perspective that you take, the Dementia Whisperer takes, when you discover somebody may have some of these clues?
Well, the easiest way for me to explain this is that we now have to understand they have a broken thinker.
Yeah.
So if we make them think and process with a broken thinker, it actually causes them anxiety. So let's just talk about hearing, for example. Steve, right now, you hear these sounds coming out of my mouth, and your brain is able to turn these sounds, process these sounds into words that make sense for you because your brain is working. But really, my words are actually coming to your ear as a sound. It's your brain who hears it because you process what these mean. So, how would you feel if I came on your show today and I answered everything like this? Blah, 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 blah. Now, you hear that, but you or your audience, they can't make sense of that. I think you'd be going, excuse me, I think I have a crazy lady here and we're going to move on. That's because I would make you feel very uncomfortable if I was saying things that you couldn't understand, right? How would you feel, Steve, if I started asking you questions like this, blah, 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 and expecting you to answer? How does that make you feel?
It would make me, you're right, in this societal norm and in this world, you are not playing by the rules. You're breaking the rules.
You're
It's funny, but I will tell you, you know what's interesting? I do improv, and we actually have an improv group for people with Parkinson's and memory impairment. And one of the activities, one of the games that we play is speaking in gibberish. And
Yes.
this there was a couple, one who has Parkinson's, who they were playing the various games, but they sent us a note after the improv session saying that game in speaking in gibberish, my husband loved it, and it's sort of folks, the way you do it is the blah blah blah. Like I would respond to you, Laura, speaking blah 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 blah, and then we're communicating not using our verbal language, but it's the tones and it's our body language.
Mhm.
And when you do it, you can actually communicate that way. It's pretty mind blowing.
Yep, because we're getting on a feeling level. Because understand, as as humans, as we lose brain function that we've learned over a lifetime, including understanding the spoken word, it's all about how that makes us feel. That's why I asked you, how would that make you feel? Well, you'd be annoyed, you'd be frustrated, you'd want me to go away. Well, let me show you because I was, like I said, I was an executive director and I was watching my staff trying to do what I taught them to communicate. It's polite to ask questions, isn't it? That's what we teach our caregivers. So I'm watching them and they're doing what I taught them to do and watching the look on my residents' faces because they wanted to resist. So here I'm listening. My wonderful, loving, caregiving staff that I'm trying to help them, this is what I heard. Good morning, Mrs. Smith. Would you like to get up? What would you like to wear? Would you like some coffee? What would you like to eat? Would you like to go listen to the music? And I realized because I'm watching the residents' faces go, no, 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 I already did that. No. And they're resisting. I'm thinking, it's asking the question because we're making them think of an answer and they have a broken thinker. So I said, let's not ask questions for 48 hours. I want to see what happens. Instead, we're going to use what I call positive action. So if you were my resident, instead of coming up and say, would you like to get up, Steve? I say, Steve, good morning. Come with me. I've made your favorite for breakfast. And suddenly, when we started using positive action, thinking for them, being proactive, not asking them to think, suddenly we had more cooperation. Sundowning completely was gone. And we had more content and happy family members because we trained the family members to come in and do the same thing. The entire culture, feeling, everything. And it seems simple, but I'm going to tell you, it's not easy. So I practice this all the time because we've been taught to ask questions because it's good for a healthy brain. When I ask you a question, I make you think and it stimulates your brain. It's the opposite when this loss is happening. Don't stimulate their brain because it makes them anxious. It's broken. It's like pouring diesel fuel on a regular engine. It gums it up. And when we do start thinking for them, it actually supports what they still have. Instead of saying, look at this beautiful picture. Who's this? We say, look at this beautiful picture. There's Susie, your granddaughter. She's beautiful, just like you. And you know, it'll spark it because it allows their brain to relax and they find the capabilities that are still there because we're not locking up their brain trying to make them think. We're guiding them instead.
Man, I love it. And, going back to my little improv story, that is one of the principles of improv is we don't really ask questions. You give a gift to your partner in the scene and make a suggestion and lead them down a path where we can get creative. And man, I really love this. Okay, I want to get back to this, but I also want to make sure that we address some of the questions and comments that are coming in. Someone says, what about folks who are at the earliest stage of cognitive impairment who haven't had a diagnosis? And I would be interested in your thoughts on that. Is that like when somebody, let's say in this example, that somebody calls you up on the phone or you meet somebody that says, I think something's going on with my dad. What are some of the suggestions that you give an individual at this stage?
I would say, good for you. You're recognizing there's some changes that are going on. Those are actually dementia symptoms, but understand dementia is not a diagnosis. You cannot have dementia because dementia is not an illness. Dementia is not a disease. Dementia is not a stroke. Dementia is not a traumatic brain injury. Dementia is a list of symptoms. That's why you will always hear me say dementia symptoms. Now, a symptom has to have a cause. For example, the symptom of pain has to have a cause. You can have the symptom of pain. It's your body saying, hey, something's wrong. But it's that something that is wrong is the cause or the diagnosis. So you might have an injury. You might have a muscle cramp. Those are the diagnosis. The pain is the symptom. Dementia symptoms are the symptoms of some kind of brain function loss, and it has to have a cause, and there's over 100 causes. Now, we're used to hearing the leading cause of Alzheimer's disease. But there's Parkinson's disease, there's frontotemporal disease, there's stroke, there's brain injury. There's over 100 different causes. And what those causes are doing, no matter what they are, is they're somehow robbing you of learned brain function that you've learned over a lifetime. And that includes the ability to process what we see, what we hear, how to move safely, judgment, the ability to perform tasks that we performed on autopilot in the past. There's all different places in our brain that we can lose learned brain function. And we present these different dementia symptoms that relate to the loss and relate to the cause of the loss.
Okay, wow. And so so for this person, they've identified it. What would you say are some of the first steps for them to do to be a supportive loved one who of this individual that is not had a diagnosis but is showing some of those symptoms?
So we need to really, if you can at all, we need to really be journaling the changes, because now as you see these changes happening, because most of these causes are progressive, it's not going to get better. We can't fix it, but what we can do is learn to manage it. So the next step would be to journal as much as you can. What am I seeing? What changes? My dad can no longer go in the bathroom, pick up a toothbrush and brush his teeth. If I ask him if he wants to brush his teeth, he gets really anxious and will go pick up a bar of soap because he's not understanding. So I have to start thinking for him in this way. Okay, so we want to write all that down because now we need to go to the medical community. What's best is to go to a neurologist who understands brain function loss and dementia symptoms. Often, unfortunately, the medical community is not yet as dementia aware as we need them to be either. So you might go to your family physician, say this, and they're going to tell you, which is a myth, oh, your dad's just getting older, that's aging. No, dementia symptoms are not ever, ever, ever. Progressive dementia symptoms are not ever caused just by getting older. There has to be one of these causes. So progressive dementia symptoms, this loss of brain function that we see, if it's getting worse over time, then we need to find out what's causing it. And that takes extensive testing. And even at that, neurologists are struggling to even find that cause. How do they find it? They look at the symptoms and they connect it as much as possible to the cause. Like Alzheimer's has basic dementia symptoms. Everybody's different, but basic list of dementia symptoms caused by Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's at first affects a certain part of the brain. Parkinson's affects a different part of the brain, but dementia symptoms caused by Parkinson's disease are going to be different. And so if you're seeing a change in their gait, loss of balance and coordination, tremors, those physical dementia symptoms early, then that could be caused by Parkinson's. So you need to go to your neurologist and say, these are the symptoms I'm seeing, and so that it helps them to get a clue on which direction they need to look for the cause.
Okay, this is great. And I've had dozens of experts on these and authors on these discussions, and you're the first person that has mentioned this journaling aspect. And I really, really, really support that, folks, because one common theme that I've heard on many of our discussions is I got my diagnosis and I realized that I was seeing the symptoms 3 years prior.
Yep.
And I think that if, like, even if personally we're concerned about our, our behavior or what have you, it is documenting it, talking to a friend or your partner about, hey, keep an eye on me and let's document this, because now you've got a story to tell when you go to those medical practitioners. Um, and
Exactly.
and folks, the other thing, I dropped in a link to one practitioner, Sunday Health, that are neurologists. They do online diagnosis, and they're very specific in dementia. The thing that I've heard from a lot of neurologists is that if the neurologist that you're meeting with is not familiar with dementia and its symptoms, and many are not. It can be a long and arduous task to get a proper diagnosis.
Absolutely. And they're not taught this in medical school. They, unless they specialize in it, what they do is they lean towards what we've all been taught and they give them a memory test. And I can tell you, I've had hundreds of families come to me and say, well, my dad had these symptoms. He was falling, he had tremors, he had this, but we didn't think it was any kind of dementia symptoms because we were waiting for him to forget. And we took him to his family physician, and the family physician is having this conversation with him and going, he looks fine to me. Because these can be so subtle and not have anything to do with memory. And so they'll pass these memory tests because it's not about memory loss.
Yeah, and like in any individual test is kind of like getting a physical. It's your snapshot at that point in time, whereas that's where this journal can be so helpful, folks. I love that idea, Laura. I'm gonna make sure to share that as often as I talk to somebody. Okay, we've got a great question from Suman, and I'm hoping that we can help Suman out. Where are we at here? She says, or Suman says, how do you ask for help to take you out when you have no family near or friends to help? Home care companies don't drive you. We don't drive anymore. Now, I I want to address Suman's question for a very important reason. Is Suman didn't indicate that uh, that uh, that they have dementia, but the fact is they're not driving anymore. And
Yeah.
Laura, this is one of my main soapbox speeches is there are so many people out there that have actually had a, a diagnosis and they're still driving their car.
Because
What
they
are some of
believe
your
they
thoughts
can.
on that?
Because they believe they can. It's this phenomenon called anosognosia. And anosognosia means that their brain cannot accept that they have loss because their brain still thinks they're accessing that learned brain function they've accessed all their life, and they continue to believe that they are still safe driving. So that's what I hear from family members. Well, dad comes home and he's got scuffs on the bumper, he's got a new dent, and he says, I don't know, must have happened in the parking lot, but it actually happened. He backed into somebody, there was an exchange, but he has no place in his brain to process or store that information. So it's in one ear and out the other. And he continues to access the memories he had in his brain when he was still functioning. So he accesses, I'm a good driver, because that's still in his brain. The fact that he's lost the ability or the safety net of being able to drive safely, or even that, he got lost, but he didn't store that in his brain. He's home now. That doesn't exist. So that's the challenge with driving, for example. Now, if I get dementia symptoms, I lose the ability to drive safely. What do I want my family to do? I want my family to step in and think for me. I want my family to be dementia aware and realize that I don't know I have this challenge, but we're going to take care of it anyway. So we're going to find someone to drive you. I'm going to drive you. If you don't have families, there are organizations out there that can help you. And so we have to become, like Steve talked about, we have to become as the family member to say, okay, my loved one has these dementia symptoms. What do I need to do as a dementia aware individual to meet their needs? But I can't tell them that's what's happening because they'll resist that information.
Yeah, so Suman, a couple of things. I dropped in GoGo Grandparents. That is a worldwide service that you don't need a smartphone, but they arrange for Uber and Lyft drivers for older adults and people with disabilities. Also, feel free to send me an email, steve@proaging.com. I don't know where you are in the country, but in most jurisdictions, there are these wonderful volunteer ride sharing programs that are out there. And then I know that you may have not had luck with some home care providers in getting rides and errands and things like that. There are others. Don't give up on that road, but you may find some more economical opportunities. And at the end, it's also, we talk a lot on these discussions about building a personal village. It's even if you don't have family nearby, there's friends, there's neighbors, there's churches that are out there that want to support us when we need help. Let's see. Karen says, after my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she had a series of mini strokes that led to a major stroke, vascular dementia, and had to be admitted to a nursing home, which she lived in for 5 years and died in hospice care. It was so difficult to be a caretaker from so far away. Number one, Karen, thanks for sharing that real life story. Laura, for people that are I know that this is after the fact with Karen, but for folks that are caregivers of loved ones in a situation like Karen's mom, any words of wisdom or guidance that you give to individuals like Karen?
And this is a perfect example of everyone's dementia journey is individual. If you've met one person with dementia symptoms, you've only met one person with dementia symptoms. That's why it's so necessary for everyone to have this understanding, this awareness. So when there's a stroke that happens, often it's immediate loss. And so it's very different than a progressive cause like Alzheimer's disease, or if there's any kind of brain trauma, like we're talking about, because really a stroke is a brain trauma. So there's immediate loss, immediate change. And often it can be debilitating and it can be physically debilitating. If it's physically debilitating, then often what that means is that you have to access skilled nursing, medical support 24 hours, such as skilled nursing. And so that's a really different animal than accessing assisted living or memory care. And I don't like to call it memory care. It's really more than that. It's dementia care. So it's very different because often, like with Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or Lewy body, it's this slow decline, although they can go like this and then go like this and then go like this. So it's this slow decline. So you access a different level of help. It's like being on an adventure. You're on this road of dementia care, and there's different rest stops along the way that help you get what you need, but then you'll need more. So you have to get back on the road and go to the next rest stop. So it could be in-home care help. And then that's not enough. So then it's assisted living, and then that's not enough. So then it's dementia care, and that's not enough. And then it's hospice, and then or skilled nursing. So you have to be fluid and flexible and continue to be open and ask for what help you need. And you don't know what help you need until you get there. So it's just being open and knowing as much as you can about the situation in the moment, being present with that person, and then being willing to move to the next step. Don't feel guilty about asking for more care. It's the opposite. You need to ask for more care, and you need to keep in mind for self-care, because just like I told you, 68% of the time, if that caregiver does not access help, they will get sick and go first. So don't be afraid to carve out that time for you. It's okay to ask for help so that you can get what you need as well.
Man, these are some great tips. Okay. And well, here, I want to make sure before we get to the top of the hour, Eileen, we're going to address your question in just one moment, but because we're getting close to the top of the hour, I want to just make sure that I let everybody know how they can work with Laura, and the resources that she has. So I shared Laura's website, laurawayman.com, and there's tons of resources here, okay? But uh, the Laura, before we got on, you shared with me what I think is a pretty cool uh, program that you have just launched called the Dementia Lifeboat. Do you want to share a little bit about what the Dementia Lifeboat is going to do?
Absolutely. So, as I travel around the country, I'm in front of hundreds of different people, helping them to become dementia aware. But then I go to the next one and the next one, and I'm here in Arizona, supporting people with Zoom and digital. So I decided that there needed to be even more for someone to feel a safe harbor on this dementia seas, so to speak. So with my co-pilot Karen, we developed the Dementia Lifeboat. Now it's kind of, I like to say it's kind of a hybrid between a support group, a podcast, and an educational piece or an academy. It's called the Dementia Lifeboat. It's on the platform of School, SKOOL, and it is so supportive. There's over 50 founding members that are professionals. I have people in the medical community. Hundreds of family caregivers have visited. And so I invite you to come really check this out because there's so much information. Like I said, educational pieces. We just did the basics of dementia awareness, a lot of what I'm talking about to raise your awareness, to empower you, to give you that safe harbor on the rough seas of dementia care.
Okay, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I dropped it into chat, and folks, I signed up this morning to check it out, and you get 7 days for free, so you can check it out. And then if you like it, it's 15 bucks a month. If not, you can check out before your credit card is charged. Okay. All right. Eileen has a good question here. How should you deal with combative behavior? My 98-year-old mom is in a nursing home and grabs and scratches other residents. I'm curious at your response to this. This is seems to be a very common one.
It's common. What's happening is every behavior is based on how they're feeling in the moment because they've lost the ability to regulate or manage the raw emotions that are left behind as they continue to lose brain function. So I can guarantee you that if I have the opportunity to watch your mom for a few minutes, a lot of times the staff or other family members or other residents are causing this anxiety, this reaction, this fear, because they're asking her to think. I see this all the time. The staff will come in, just like I talked about. Are you hungry? Would you like to get up? And immediately their brain starts to lock up. Then another resident passes them by and it just might say something that triggers this fear, or they might get too close to her and she can't tell them what she's feeling. She can no longer express, hey, I wanted to sit there. So she's going to act like an out of control toddler because she's running on the raw emotions without the ability to manage that. So how do we help them? We help the staff, number one, become dementia aware. We have to train them in this. Then what I see is I'll go back and there will be less of this going on, but the family members are doing it as well. They're not coming in and asking questions. And the other residents have to be managed as well because they're feeling the same thing. So we have to have this global dementia awareness. It's like a bubble that happens where there's more contentment. We don't stop it, fix it, or change it. There still be challenges, but we're just managing these feelings in a different way. We're talking to their feelings. We're helping them we give them permission to feel, but helping them on how to manage it, right? So that's often what's happening. I will get calls from all over the United States, and they'll say, Mr. Smith punched our caregiver. And I say, what question did they ask him right before? Well, they asked him if he wanted to take a shower. Stop asking, right?
Yeah, it's really a culture change, and I'm really like the common thing that we hear is uh, don't argue with a person with dementia. But I like how you frame this as let's is not ask being very aware when we are asking a question and not go down that path. Um, Okay. The Brian and Sarah ask, how do we deal with unhelpful out-of-state relatives? I bet you in your journey you have run into a few of these situations.
Yep.
I think the one
Yep.
I hear most of is you have one family member who's doing so much work and is there on the front lines, and then it's all the Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yes, because they're calling mom from Delaware and they live in California. And the out of state caregiver is calling in, and mom sounds fine to them on the phone, right? And they're going, well, what do you mean she needs dementia care? She's doing fine. But they're not seeing the day-to-day changes, her loss of ability to take care of activities of daily living, her loss of ability to keep herself safe, her loss of ability to eat safely or take care of any of her bodily needs. The fact that she's falling all the time. She does need that supervision, but you can't see that on the phone. You can't even see that if you come to visit for 2 weeks. So my best solution for that is I do 90-minute consultations via Zoom. It's very inexpensive for a flat fee. Pile on all your family members from across the United States. I'm going to help them see this through the lens of dementia awareness. And then you begin to go, oh, I get it. It's really not helpful when I call mom and say, how are you? What did you do today? Blah, blah, blah. Because when I hang up, mom is anxious and she goes to the person who's nearby and there's all these behaviors going on, right? So now we're going to change all of the care approach. We're going to surround them and make them feel what they need to be feeling: loved, safe, secure, and valued as much as possible.
Great. And here I'm going to jump back on your website. So if this family wanted to try to organize that, what's the best place for them to go? Just shoot you an email right here, or is there
Yeah,
a sec?
shoot me an email and we'll get it on the calendar. I do hundreds of those every month, and it's just a 90-minute Zoom, and we schedule that. And, I can do weekends, evenings. I can, make it easy for the entire family to join. And we just become dementia aware. It's enjoyable. It's uplifting. And there are all these family dynamics. It's going to help with that.
Yeah, and one of the cool things is you could share this webinar with your family members and then and let them listen to this, and then, hey, would you like to schedule time with her? You heard where she talked about that. Okay. I know we're at an hour, but we've got it looks like we've got a few more questions, and then I appreciate everybody's time today. Given the confusion about the term dementia and its association with memory issues, which is only part of it, are there any terms that would be more helpful for us? And I'm glad this person is anonymous brought this up, because Sam Simon, who is referred to as the dementia man, he often says, I don't like this term dementia and Alzheimer's. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, dementia is not a standalone term. It's dementia symptoms. So when we start thinking about that, I was just at a seminar yesterday, and the whole great information, they go through the whole thing, but they did not explain it's dementia symptoms. They kept calling it, you cannot have dementia. You can't have it. You can have dementia symptoms from a cause of dementia symptoms. So you can have Alzheimer's disease and you're exhibiting that with dementia symptoms. So the whole program was great, talking about dementia and Alzheimer's, blah, blah, blah. Gentleman in the back raises his hand and he says, well, what's the difference between Parkinson's and dementia? And I'm going, you didn't explain. You can have Parkinson's disease, and the way that you're going to see that Parkinson's disease, what it's doing to your brain, is the dementia symptoms caused by Parkinson's. Okay,
Okay.
so it's not the same thing. I hear families say, well, my wife has dementia, but it hasn't turned into Alzheimer's yet. That's upside down. You can't have dementia symptoms unless you've got something like this going on in your brain. And
Okay.
it could be any of these 100 causes.
So I've learned a bunch of things from you today, and that I'm going to be sharing as much as possible. But one of the things is that when I'm talking to somebody, I'm going to try to say this person. So you say that your family member is showing some dementia symptoms.
Mhm.
We need to figure out what that is and why. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you is, before you schedule an appointment, is start journaling, because you might end up waiting 6 weeks to get into that neurology office, and you'll have 6 weeks of journal entries by then.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. And what the way I like to explain it is, you as a layperson, you and I as lay people, we can say that's a dementia symptom. What we can't say is the cause necessarily. However, I do say, you know what I've observed over the past 25 years is that looks like a symptom that's common to Alzheimer's disease, or that looks like a symptom that's common to Parkinson's. Now, I'm not diagnosing your loved one with that. I'm just telling you that that's what I've observed, and that's the information I want you to take to that medical professional who can diagnose it for you.
Man, all right. This is really great. Okay, and I'm getting a bunch of positive feedback for you there in the in chat. Karen said, I had to fight to get hospice into the nursing home, and probably too late. I learned that engaging hospice earlier in end of life symptoms would have prevented all the physical and mental suffering. Yeah, I was talking to Laura before we turned the camera on, and I was going to say, in doing these discussions, my favorite topics to talk about are dementia and end of life, and those were the two topics that would make me nervous and apprehensive 4 years ago. But there's so much creativity and so much thought and so much information that needs to be dispensed on these. And you've combined both of those. And Laura, would you agree that, you know, uh, dementia symptoms and their cause are progressive, but they can lead to like we can die from these symptoms, like when our brain stops working. Uh,
Yes, the symptoms become so extreme because the actual causes are terminal. Alzheimer's is a terminal diagnosis. Eventually, it will take away your ability to utilize the brain functions you're born with. It will stop you from breathing. It will stop your organs from actually working. Once it gets past all that learned brain function, it gets to the brain stem. The Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and Lewy body, these are terminal illnesses. So we will be talking about end of life, but it can be a very long journey. It
yeah,
can be 20 years of suffering from dementia symptoms. But I have in my book a chapter, in the grief chapter, talking about dementia aware hospice and a family who says, I wish I would have asked for this help so much earlier.
just like the one here.
Absolutely right, Karen.
And, and,
Ask for this help. Dementia is not a 6-month terminal diagnosis. Whatever's causing the dementia symptoms, Alzheimer's can be 4 or 5 years, but you can benefit from hospice because they understand it's a very different animal.
yeah, and one thing I've had, uh, we've had families on here that have shared their stories, and many of them say, you know, It's been 5 years that I've been caring for my loved one with dementia. I'm going through the grieving process, and I should have started that earlier. So if you get a diagnosis like this in your family, it's not a bad idea to connect with the local hospice providers right now, even though it could be a long journey, because you don't, what Karen just said, we always call too late.
Yes, and you can get hospice care through your insurance, through Medicare. You can't get regular dementia care through your insurance. So if hospice can be helpful, utilize that right away.
Okay,
Right away.
now I'm glad we brought this up because a bunch of folks are saying, like you just said, in most cases, hospice being covered by Medicare. But Karen has a question. Can hospice care for Alzheimer's before the 6-month rule? Is there any, do you know, or is there anybody?
I talk about that.
Okay,
Most dementia aware hospice organizations understand there's no 6 month rule. I've had many of my clients that accessed hospice that are on hospice for 2 or 3 years. Now they come up to that anniversary of 6 months, but they still can get back on hospice because that is kind of a vague term. What if your loved one has a cancer diagnosis that says they've got 6 months, but they survive past that? Well, they're not going to throw them off hospice. Well, it's kind of the same thing because there's no treatment for dementia symptoms that are causing this breakdown in their body. There's no treatment, so it's not like you have to get off treatment. There's no chemo or any kind of radiation that's going to that you have to get off of in order to go to hospice. You're still declining, and there's no therapy or treatment or prevention for that. So that means the rule of hospice means that they can still provide you with this hospice care until the end because you still need it, right?
mhm. Okay, man. Well, thank you so much. So, Laura, thank you so much for your presentation. Once again, thanks to our community members for their great questions. And I already have an idea to have you back. And here's what I would love to do is let's do a program specifically on journaling when you think that your loved one has dementia. And I would love it if you could, maybe some of your clients could join us and share how they journaled, or we could share with people some techniques for doing this. I
Absolutely.
I think that would be a really cool discussion for us.
Let's do it. I'm up for it. Anything that I can do to help you and everyone who's listening to become dementia aware. I'm going to ask, talk to someone give them my information. I travel all over the United States to be in front of absolutely everyone, like we talked about, because we all as a society need this information.
I agree. Yeah, this is great. All right, Laura, have a great time. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll see you at the next one, and we're gonna get. I'm very excited about this journaling for a discussion with Laura. So talk to you all soon. Thanks, Laura.